It was a good ball game. Certainly, we're on a little bit of a roll. It was good to extend that roll with the type of game that we played in this last ball game against Western Michigan. We've got the meat part of our schedule coming up in terms of trying to reach our goals. They're all going to be extremely important football games. So, up next is Miami, who we all know is a big rivalry. Both schools see that game a little differently in terms of that. They've got a very, very good football team, so that should be a great matchup.
I thought you undersold it there, Frank. You said you're on a pretty good roll, but your current 3-game win streak includes margin of victory that's never happened in program history. It's never happened in the course of MAC history.
Mm-hmm.
How do you don't get caught looking at that too much and worrying about what's ahead of you still, I guess?
Yeah, I think we're a pretty smart football team, and that's along with having talent and being a good football team. You got to be a smart football team. You don't get to be good unless you're smart on the field. You don't have a lot of breakdowns. You don't have a lot of penalties against us, which we don't. The other thing in terms of being smart is just understanding what the game is all about. Those games we've shown improvement. We've played well, but we're going to have to play better in order to ride this thing out and reach our goals. So they're a football team that's been constantly improving. They're smart in that regard. They've never accepted a win as a win. They always looked at it as, how can we get better? And when you have that kind of attitude, it can move you forward.
Your answer to a lot of these kinds of questions has been no limits, but there are challenges this week. Miami's got a couple extra days. You guys got one less day. Do you do anything different schematically, or again, does that fall under that umbrella of so what?
Well, no, you do some things different as you adjust for your practices leading up to these kind of games. We had a 4-day window earlier in the year, and we came through that pretty well. This I see as a 5-day window. There's challenges certainly to that. We gave them a day off after we got back very late from Western Michigan. Being on the road is when you have a shorter window the next week even adds to that challenge. But our guys have been good at taking opportunities to rest themselves and getting treatment and doing the things that enable you to move forward and continue to play your best football. So we'll see how that all plays out. We're going to have a little bit more of a regular practice today versus a walkthrough. I think that's going to fit us fine. We did that earlier in the year. You just got to get some reps in terms of what the opponent is doing offensively, defensively, and special teams-wise, and you can't get them if you don't use some of these days as somewhat of a traditional practice. We certainly won't. We have not been in pads in practices for the last few weeks. Our practices have been cut short. We're not going to really do any running in special teams. We'll walk through the special teams practice of it. We're down to 15 periods on this practice today. We'll walk there. There's at least 20 minutes of special teams work built into that practice. We'll basically walk to jog through our assignments on those versus running through. So, you take steps wherever you can to help your team save their legs and not get banged up.
At the very start of the season, you said one thing your club had to do much better was create forced turnovers. 23 on the season, that's second in the country. How much of that is putting emphasis on that particular aspect? How much of that is the extra motivation of the belt? What kinds of things have went into you guys kind of reaching that goal of creating and forcing more turnovers?
Well, I think a share of it certainly comes down to emphasizing it. But, you know, that's something that all coaches do from the moment you start practice in the fall to the end of practice in the fall. You know, you put a heavy emphasis on it. But you got to keep driving it at home, and you got to continue to find ways to keep it on their mind and keep them working towards being one of the better teams in the MAC. You know, we looked at it. The guys that play in the MAC championship game are guys that are very high in the turnover ratio. Akron, I think, led the conference last year with 10 plus in the turnover ratio. You know, right now they're, I think, maybe -8, and so you got to keep coaching it every year. You know, which I know Coach Bowden and everybody else does. But not only you got to coach it every year, you got to keep coaching it every game, and you know, that's what I think all coaches try to do. I think we have smart players, and they listen to what we have to say, and they take in the coaching that is being thrown their way. And you know, some teams do that better than others in terms of teams that obviously we've had over our years here. But this group is special in that way. So they've fought and worked at understanding how important the turnover ratio is and trying to win it.
With your emphasis on special teams, really since you got here 14 years ago, is it rewarding to have a game like you had last time out when it is such a big part in what transpired? Yeah,
we know how important it is. We spend a great deal of time in meetings with special teams, great deal of time out on the field with special teams, probably as much as anybody in the country. And so that importance, if you feel it's that important, you better spend time and energy with it. We do that. You know, we have the talent to be good, and then with the work that we're giving them, that allows them to try to be the best they can be in that area. And you know, we have a group that is really good at covering kicks, returning kicks, you know, making smart decisions out there in special teams play, and that all comes back to either hurt you or help you, depending upon how well you're doing those things. This game will be interesting in that, you know, Miami's first in the MAC in terms of, you look at MAC games in terms of returning kickoffs. I think it's 31 point something, a kickoff return, and so you can see that Miami's rated highly in a lot of special teams categories. So are we. So that should be a great matchup.
What stands out about this Miami club this year? They've got a string where they've scored at least 30 in 6 straight games, and despite some injuries, they've been one of the better teams in conference play in terms of offense until last week. But what jumps out when you're watching film on the Red Hawks? Well,
you know, they're not one-dimensional by any stretch of the imagination as you look at their offense. You know, Ragland's an excellent thrower. I think he's throwing somewhere around 66% when you look at MAC games. He's got really tall receivers on the outside that he throws to, and sometimes, you know, they just throw the ball and let those guys go up and get it, you know. But he's also a very accurate thrower whenever it comes time to pinpoint a throw. And, you know, and they have speed at the slot, and so it's a great combination of receivers and a guy that can get them the ball. He runs. He's a very, very good running quarterback, and he'll hurt you scrambling and keeping drives alive, and sometimes getting in the end zone with the scramble. And they have some runs designed for him, you know, so he'll hurt you every bit as much running the ball if you're not careful as he will throwing the ball. Then you know, their running game is really good. They've got an experienced line. I think their whole line is coming back from last year, and so they've got an experienced group there. They've got 2 really good running backs, and you know, Kenny Young. You know, you look at his stats. I think he's in MAC play averaging something like 9-point-something yards per carry, which I would imagine leads the MAC. You know, and so And I know Chuck has, indicated that he's one of their best, if not the best player on their football team. So they've got a way to score points through the air and on the ground. So that makes them a tough football team to compete against in terms of stopping them from putting points up. Defensively, they're also very good. They're really aggressive. They've got a very good blitz package. There's in the sack department, they're one of the better teams in the MAC. They're good at getting tackles for losses, putting you in long yardage situation. So I think they're second against the run, letting only an average of 2 yards per carry by opponents. So they stop the run, and they force you to throw, and they try to make you one-dimensional, and they do a very good job of that. And so that should be a good matchup there a little bit. Can we run the ball with effectiveness in order to help our throwing game? I do like the fact that if we wanted to throw the ball 30 times a game, I think we could be successful at it. And so it doesn't have to be. It's the rushing game that gets it done for you. But that's a great way to start if you can get that going.
You guys have owned this rivalry throughout the last 14 years, but the last few trips to Oxford have been close, have been nail-biters. What is it about that atmosphere or that trip or this rivalry that lets you know that it's probably going to be another one of those games this time around?
Well, you look at home games versus away games with most teams, and you see their record is better at home than away generally. And this has always been a traditionally hard-fought football game. I think both teams have every time they stepped on the field against one another have played very, very hard, physical football. And when you do that, anything can happen within a game. I think both teams are talented. Both teams will play physical football. It should be really an exciting, interesting game.
As Jason mentioned, 5 straight wins for you guys against Miami. These redshirt seniors have never experienced a loss against Miami before. How important is that to not only establish that winning culture that you've established over 14 years, but specifically against your rival too?
Well, as you know, every game is important, and when you get in the MAC, it seems like if you lose one, man, you're fighting from behind right away. And so it's a tough conference in that regard. And I think in particular this year there's a lot of really good football teams in the MAC. So that makes everything even a little bit more difficult. The rivalry part of it I think has been really good for both teams. I think it's a rivalry, but it's one of I think respect in terms of the football programs are concerned, and so this will be another typical game in with these two ball clubs in terms of it being hard fought. Some special plays will be made by both teams. You just hope that we just hope we make a few more.
After 3 straight games like you've had, you talked about your guys are mature, making sure that they know that they still have a lot of football to play. But how do you evaluate the are we peaking at the right time versus are we still trying to get better for the home stretch of this season?
Well, this is the home stretch that we're on right now, and there's not much time left to get better. You better be a pretty good football team right now, and I think we're playing on top of our game. So I'd rather be sitting where we're sitting than fighting from the bottom, working our way up, and not getting better and just still making a lot of mistakes, the same mistakes that were made earlier in the year, type of thing. And so I don't see that happening. I see us having continually gotten better. That's going to have to be the case. We're going to have to be on top of our game to certainly win this one and win any of the remaining 2 after this one.
Do you think it's kind of an advantage to play on just 6 days later, because you guys are playing so well, you just get back on the field as soon as you probably can?
I wouldn't mind a little more rest. I think that would be that would be fine. But our players have been really amazing to me almost in terms of their energy for each game. They've gotten themselves ready to play football. They've really been a good practice team. They've done that with regularity throughout the course of the season. And if you have a team that's that way and can get themselves ready to play mentally, emotionally, and excited about it, then you're going to have your best chance. A lot of teams can't do that. It is one of the most difficult things to do it 12 games in a row. As I've said this probably to you guys 100 times, but it's very, very true. If you have a team that has been able to do that, then you have a team that's going to give itself its best chance of playing winning football.
Coach, in 3 straight conference games, starters usually expected to play 12 quarters. Of course, 4 times 3, easy math. Most of your starters have only played 8 over the past 3. Have you seen that ability to get those guys rest really come to fruition over these 3 games? Has it really kind of set you guys up even better to go attack this back half of this final stretch of the season?
Yeah, that helps in a lot of ways. In terms of just freshness, legs, shoulders not being sore as much, banged up as much, being able to go from the game to most everybody practicing and not having to go through half of a week until they can even get back on the football field. If you just go through so many straight games in a row where you're pounding, and so I think this has been fortunate that we've been able to play at a level and separate ourselves early in games, that we've been able to get a lot of guys playing time and rest our starters. I think that's huge. Yeah. And not only is that good for your starters, but it's good emotionally and mentally for your guys that do a lot of work and practice getting the starters ready and don't get a lot of chances to get on the field. You get chances to get them on the field. I'm all for that kind of football. I'm not into if you are 70 points better than a team necessarily trying to beat them by 70 points. I would like to get our guys reps that deserve reps. That only increases what they're all about in terms of their football ability, their enthusiasm. It just helps your program in general and in a lot of different ways.
I just wanted to ask you this. You've obviously watched a lot more football than I have, but I had never seen 2 muffed kickoffs in back-to-back attempts at a kickoff. I just want to ask you, have you ever seen that before in your coaching career?
Yeah, no, I can't say that I have, and I've seen a lot of football over the years, and I can't ever recall that happening in a game where the muff. I've seen sometimes teams muff a ball a couple times in a game, but never getting recovered on kickoffs like that by the opponent.
Coach, earlier today, Chuck Martin was asked about this rivalry and what it meant to him, and he said something along the lines that, this is why he loves to coach, because a rivalry like this is what makes college football special. Being a part of this rivalry for over a decade now, what does it mean to you as a coach?
Well, it's been special in a lot of ways, and I think that's true of almost all rivalries. As I go back to my older coaching days, and I don't care if it was the last school I coached at or high school, rivalries were huge to players. But they're also huge to coaches. They're huge to your fans if the rivalry is a good enough rivalry, and it's good to your school and community in general. And I think that's been the case with the Miami-Ohio rivalry for all the years. And, people understand the importance of it, the intensity of it, and how hard the players fight to get it done.
I know that through the course of the season, you've talked about playing complete games against Ball State and Bowling Green, a lot of 14 points. But where does that first half stack up for you as a coach, going into halftime of 45-0? All 3 phases of your team made plays for you.
Mm-hmm.
Was that wow, this is our team is hitting stride right now?
Well, you got to feel like they're in stride right now. Obviously, with how they've been playing, but you can get knocked off course so easily. And so you got to understand that being on a roll only means something if you are able to continue that roll. And so you gotta just work and practice in a manner that's going to allow you to play your best football. You're going to be up against different levels of programs and teams as you go through all this, and they're going to have something to say about how fast you're rolling, and so you always work at playing your best football. You do that, and you try to win. If you can get that done, then you got to feel pretty good about things.
Coach, can you comment on Marlon Brooks? He's really solidified the back half of your defense over these last 4 games, and he's stepped up so well with Jalen Fox out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a great competitor. I love that in the guy. He is ready to compete on every play in practice, and sometimes a little too much to where you have to kind of pull him back a little bit. But you like players, that have his makeup in terms of his toughness, his fight. He's not a big corner, but he will battle you, and he's got athleticism, and so that truly helps. He's a smart football player, so he's been great for us. He's been playing a little banged up. I think he's getting better.
I was talking to Kylan and Javon earlier last week, and one of the comments they made was, we always talk about how the team progresses, but they were making comments as well as how they think the leadership has progressed. Have you seen that? Have you seen the captains maybe show growth over these last 4 or 5 weeks as well?
Yeah, I think I've seen growth in a lot of the seniors through a couple years of being in this program now. There's some things that we do where we work on helping develop leadership and togetherness, and I think all that can come together with the right group, and so you got to have the right players to start with, but then you can always get them to really step up and be what they can be in terms of leadership for you, and I think there's a sense, there's a feeling that that we're doing pretty well right now. These guys work to get us there, along with the rest of the team. I mean, early in the year, with the Cincinnati and Virginia game, things could have turned south a little bit on this football team, but the players really didn't let that happen. And I got to give them a lot of credit for what they've been all about, game after game after game, in terms of getting ready to battle each game and giving their best. They've been super at that.
Coach, it seems like the offense is playing with urgency. The defense is playing pretty loose. Javon, obviously, is kind of more of a vocal guy. Marlon plays pretty loose on that back end. The linebackers kind of fly around, make plays. Have you seen? Has the defense kind of loosened up a little bit? It seemed like they were playing a little tense at the beginning of the year, and now they've loosened up and kind of rounded into form with that.
Yeah.
It's a different style of play, I guess.
Well, some of those guys were playing with inexperience, and so we had a mixture of guys on the field. As I mentioned to you guys probably numerous times, the core of our defense inside, is made up of young guys that are developing. Our corners, we still have a lot of young guys there that are getting playing time, and they kept getting better. So that all comes along with just getting a chance to get on the field and get playing time at some positions for our guys.
And then I think even I would say since the UMass game, when the defensive line started to get more pressure on quarterbacks, the secondary seems to be playing a lot better. Obviously, those two go hand in hand, but do you think the secondary has grown to trust the defensive line and the linebackers a little more since they have more experience under their belt now, that where they can start to make a few more plays than they could in the beginning of the year?
Well, I don't know how that all fits that way. I do know it fits in terms of getting 11 guys to play football together, and believing in one another and trusting in one another, and I think that's what you're getting at. And you know, I think that feeling, that belief is there now for our football team. But you know, they're going to have plenty of challenges ahead here, and that, you know, they're going to have to face those challenges and respond really well and in a positive manner for us to finish this thing right.
2012, you guys were on a heck of a roll. Went over to Miami, and I know you remember what happened there. Is that a scenario that you will bring up to your team this week to remind them, you know, how quickly things can get off track? You said, what was it? Things can get knocked off course pretty quickly. That particular scenario with that firsthand experience, is that something you'll use to illustrate that point this week?
Well, you know, I'm not one that usually goes back and picks out games and you know, try to build off of that. You know, we pretty much have a philosophy that we go by and continue to mold, and you know, it's a philosophy that really entails some of that stuff. You know, that how easy it is to all of a sudden lose what you've gained. You know, and you're all of a sudden not the same football team, and that's something that we don't want to have happen. And so our players, I think, understand the difficulty of being a football player and the difficulty of being on a great football team. It's not easy. You know, there are all kind of obstacles that get put in your way, and so we do talk to them about that. Sometimes, you know, I get somewhat specific in pulling things up, but a lot of times it'll just be general conversation about it. But it is important to remind them what got them where they're at, and you know, we're not really where we want to be. You know, we wanted to win more football games early on, and so it's not like we're thinking, you know, we're just beating our chest. That we're far from that. You know, we're trying to make sure no one beats our chest. You know, and so we're looking for ways to kind of continue to get better, and if we do that, we're doing the best we can do, and we're doing what we need to do to give us our best chance.